Good morning from your favorite internet
Stay
uncle.
ready. You don't have to get ready. Get established. Let's go. Protect and serve. I truly believe this starts day one. A child is born, and a mother's instinct is to protect and serve her child. But when does this change? At what point throughout this child's life does this model change? I mean, it's interesting enough, it's the police model, but I think we need to embrace this in our own community. We want to also make sure that forces outside of our community don't taint this child. And what I mean by that is we have so many things working against us. You have social media, you have entertainment, you have a part of our entertainment is our music. So we don't want this tainting our child as they grow up, because the thing is, especially in our community, Black parents most of the time they work. They're working to support their households. They get home, we have an interaction with our kids, but do we truly know everything that our kid is interfaced with during that day? How do you feel about that, Mr. Garrett Williams?
I think most people in, at least in North America, most families are working a lot of two parent households. So we're getting it across the board, but it's very difficult to know all of the insides and outs of what your kids are doing. That's why it's so important that you should follow their social media and see what they're doing and have conversations about it, because that's your imprint that you're leaving for the world. That's the way you show up before you show up, and that's the way you're going to be represented before people necessarily sometimes talk to you. They are looking at your social media first, and that comes from job interviews and everything else. But I think the key is having activities for your children, because you can't physically always be there to be on top. So there has to be some type of pipeline that you put them in from when they're out of school into what's next, what they're going to do that day. Because if they just come home and just have time, I mean, we know from being in school, after school is when all the sex go down, but if you got an opportunity to be in an activity, be in a sport, be in something mentally challenging, being in martial arts, something where you go from school to your next activity, it'll actually create a better level of discipline for you, and to give your parents some security while they're out working, trying to provide, a good life for the family. They also know that you're out learning things that are valuable to the family, individually, and to the community.
You brought up an interesting point, Garrett. You talked about sex happens after school a lot of times before the parents get home. Why do you think that there's been such a huge agenda of sex being pushed on our youth? You think about it, like, what does a 4 and 5 year old think about most of the time? It's usually playing games, having fun. So why is it such a agenda with, like I said, people outside our community to push sex on our young people? Can you chime in for me, Ronnie?
I think they have this agenda because they don't want our community to be focused on what's important, which is solving today's problems, right? They don't want us to be focused on that. They want us distracted, and they want kids talking about anything else. They don't want our community to be competitive. So
Oh,
that's why there's so many toys, so many distractions, so many shows that have nothing to do with nothing. They want our kids distracted and not focused on anything. While with their kids, they make sure that they have them working in groups from a young age. I've taught it. I taught at a school where, people that worked in the government, where they sent their kids. And they're working in small groups from kindergarten, first grade, second grade, and they're working on solving problems. And another difference is teachers focus on the child's gifts and where they excel. They don't zoom in and focus on their faults. Like if they need extra help in something, fine, but they pay attention to what the child's good in. So that is just from my experience, what I've seen. That's the difference that I've seen. So, yeah, they
Cool.
don't want us to win, and they create these jobs where you have to go out and they overwork the hell out of our community. I'm against that whole work grind until you die culture. Damn that. Forget that. Um, it's all a setup. And then, with parents, you get home and you're exhausted. You have no time for your child, which is what they like. While it doesn't work that way on the other side.
True, that is true. I want to also address this. I noticed, like, especially in our community, like you said, with the parents being overworked, we're not
Mm.
able to be an influence in the school process, meaning a
Mm.
part of the PTA, meaning being visible in the school. So a lot of times, I think kids fall through the cracks because there's no follow up. What do you think about that, Mr. Shine?
Um, yeah. You know, Ronnie put it perfectly, as far as the us not having the time to really be invested in that, in children, especially schools. I mean, I could say the same thing for me as when I grew up, just taking it from a personal perspective as far as my parents. They worked at night. Um, my mother worked at a night job and she worked during the day as a home health care professional. Uh, so when she came back home, I mean, she didn't drive a car; she just rode buses. So that in itself is an exhausting thing. So when she came back home, I mean, all she really could do was maybe cook dinner, if she felt up to it, and then go to sleep and prepare to go to work that night. Um, my father, he also worked that night. So when he came home, he was just exhausted, and once he got up and really did what he had to do, he just, went about his way and just did his thing just to prepare for that night again. Um, that is the problem because when you don't have you have parents to be able to be physically a rested and prepared to be able to deal with the kids, especially a big family, it makes it hard for them to be able to understand that they have schoolwork and such like that to be able to learn and be have that parent readily available to be able to assist them if in case they need help. I mean, of course that's going to be the case because kids are they need that assistance and guidance to be able to catch on to what they need to catch on to as far as school and other activities. If there's no other parental person or anybody that's that would be able to supervise them and put them in a position where they can be able to learn and be focused and disciplined.
Cool.
Can I jump in here?
Oh,
Steve?
go ahead. Go ahead.
Something very important that I think you said. You mentioned a couple things that stood out to me. One being, I think maybe Ronnie said it about the black community being overworked. I want to talk about that, and then also with some of the things about the involvement with the PTA and things of that nature. Now, my upbringing, I grew up in a two-parent household. My dad worked for the government. He had a pretty good job, so my mom didn't have to work when we were young. So it was nothing for me to be at school and to look up, and my mom would be there somewhere, volunteering in the library, just in the school. She was there. It kept me in line. Not that I was a bad kid, but it just kept me in line, knowing that she was nearby. All the field trips. Anytime there was a field trip, my mom was there. I think in our community, I don't know if we know as a culture how invaluable and important that is for you to be involved in that process. And I know sometimes parents like, well, I got to work. Well, you got kids. And when you have kids, you got to decide to raise them. And part of raising them is being emotional support for them. And it was very important. Even if my mom, because sometimes the girls would just come take my mom from, from me during field trip time. But just knowing that she was there gave me a certain level of comfort. And it gave me a different position with authority figures in the school and in the classroom, because they knew that I had a parent that was always close by. And I think that's valuable, and I think that's something we need to look at. And with the part about being overworked, we have to choose better jobs. We have to stop thinking of all the things that are normal to go work, or what we consider normal, and start looking for other opportunities that are there, other positions. And also we might need to look at marriage different. And I think that's a big thing. Right now, people seem that they just cool with having kids without being married. That's something that we need to really work on in our community. The family structure is a thing for a reason. And if you look in the communities that thrive, the Asian communities, Caucasians, any community, we're at the bottom when it comes to family structure. We talk family a lot, but we don't build family a lot.
Can I chime in? Well,
Absolutely, Ronnie.
Well, that's part of it is our fault a little bit, but then a lot of it isn't. A lot of it is by design. Drugs. How did they get in our communities? Like when I grew up, when I was very young, I remember I lived in a community where, I had this older lady that would like always look out and help my mother and watch me. Like whether I really never saw her, but she always knew exactly what I was doing and where I was. So I mean, I remember that I had women that I looked up to, and I felt safe. Everybody looked out for everybody. Then crack hit, right? That was by design. That was
Truly.
because that's what the government did, right? They put the drugs there, and they put the drugs there specifically in our communities to destroy our communities. It was all by design. So how do we fix
I'm gonna tell you
this?
step one. I gotta say this. Step one is to stop falling for every trap they drop. Every piece of cheese that's dropped in our community, we have to stop falling for it.
That's right.
Was not a gift. Crack was the worst thing that in recent times that happened to our community. Let me say this. I'm gonna call it self-inflicted. Even though it was put there and placed there for us to take it, we didn't have to. And see,
I don't know if it's totally self-inflicted. And the only reason why I say that is because you got to look at where most of the better paying jobs, who was running those, during certain times. You know what I mean? I mean, if you talk about now, of course, it's a little bit more of a playing field in there. But, back in a certain time, most of those higher paying jobs had, people that were of different races that were running them. So that, you basically had to go to them, and seek that type of employment. Now, if those people was willing to employ you, then they may employ you at maybe some type of job where it's maybe not as the amount of pay that you might be deserving of if you have the skill level to be compensatory to it, or if you know, you've gained some level of skill to be able to have a good paying job. But I mean, it's you in some instances, yes, it's true, but you know, but most of the time it was based off of those people who had those positions, who were in higher positions, that were not of, you know, the same race as you.
I can
So
agree and disagree with that because you got to remember where we come from. We were always, I mean, at a certain point, jobs is a new idea. It's a relatively new idea in the world. People saw opportunity and they went out and made money. They provided a service. I mean, so some of the jobs that we do, that's manual labor, chimney sweeper, window cleaner, lawn maintenance. You can make tremendous amounts of money doing that.
and let me just interrupt you for a second, Big. I'm glad you said that because that's a part of serving our community, not just protecting our community, serving our community, creating a financial balance within the community. See, and that's the problem. And we talked about this on previous shows where we are one of the few communities that allow outside forces to come in our community and operate as business.